place where the gospel was preached in Europe. So it's a very early establishment of the church. And Paul wasn't there very long, but his teaching was so powerful, and his love for them was so powerful that a solid church was formed, even though he wasn't there very long. And later he sent Timothy back there to encourage the church, the believers in Christ. And then he wrote a letter. So this is a Pauline epistle to the church at Thessalonica. And so chapter 1 is really all about encouragement to the church. And it's a short chapter, but familiar passages like 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 2, we give thanks to God always for all of you constantly mentioning you in our prayers. So he's always very encouraging, and he prays for the church even though he's not there. And then chapter 2, Paul writes about his own conduct or behavior kind of as an example while he was there. And so the example of how he behaved towards the Christians at Thessalonica is a great model for us in our relationships. So we can learn from how Paul displayed his relationship. And a big focus was the idea of discipleship. And so that's really the key here, is looking at what it means in terms of discipleship, which is fellowship. So, and this verse was very powerful to me when I first started after college teaching high school math, which you know I loved. And I actually taught at a boarding school. Have I told you this before? The students live there. So we don't see these many in the West, but in the East, there's Andover, Exeter, St. Paul's are huge boarding schools. So that means the students live there in dorms 24/7, so it's not like a college. So, and so I was on the faculty at Cape High School, which is in Carpinteria, my hometown. It's up on the hill, and there's about 260 students, so very small, and they live, all but 10% live in dorms. So I lived in the dorms with the students, and so it's very intense because you're together all the time. And sometimes I would go 5 or 6 days without even leaving the campus up on a hill. So in some ways it's isolating. And so typical daily schedule, and this for me was 9 years. I would wake up in the morning, have my quiet time, cook breakfast, and then I would be in my apartment, or the dorms. I had an apartment, and then there were 18 students living in rooms in this, right, sharing the doorway. And in the morning they each had a job to do, like sweeping or taking out trash. So my first job was to walk around and inspect, and even they had to have the rooms clean. So I had to go, it was like almost like the military. So I had to make sure their beds were made, and they were ready for the day. This was about 7:30, and then the bell would ring, and I would go off to my class. And my class, I believe, was 100 yards from my apartment. So it was a short commute. So I'd walk to my class, and there would be, and the class is really small, maybe 12 students in each class. And you would usually teach a period, teach 2 periods, and then you would be off for a period. And then I would just go back to my apartment and read the paper or something. And then lunch was in the cafeteria, so I didn't have to quit lunch. So I could walk to the cafeteria, eat lunch, and that was another 100 yards. There was a gymnasium right there, so I could go play basketball, and a pool. So it was almost like a country club, because everything was there. And then after school, I would coach tennis or basketball, go home and change, and then go to the cafeteria for dinner. And then after dinner were study hours, so the students were required to study from 7:30 to 9. So yeah, so I had to go and kind of make sure they were studying in their dorm room or the library. If somebody wasn't doing well in my class, I would say, "You have to come to my apartment tonight," and I would sit them down on my table and make them study their geometry or whatever, because the parents weren't there. So that was the difference. So basically, in these environments in high school, the faculty, that was like a dorm parent, was kind of served as parents, because the parents are far away in most cases. So it's really interesting to be away from home when you're 9th grade or whatever, very young. And then 7:39 is study hours, and then 9 to 10:30 was free time. So everybody run around and go to the gym, and I would go and play basketball in the gym. and then 10:30 had to be back in the dorms. So I had to go and check to make sure everybody's in the dorm. And then 11 o'clock was lights out, so I had to go and check lights out. And actually there were usually three different faculty members that would share that responsibility because their dorms were together. And then lights out except for seniors. Seniors could have later lights out. And then start over the next day. So you see, so I didn't have, so it was this intense time together. And the result of that, what I see among the students there, and the students and the faculty, is these lifelong deep friendships, because you're living together basically. It's like a family, and so you don't see that normally in high school. You don't really see that normally in college either. But at this formative time, it was a chance to be, to have these deep friendships, and the principles. And it wasn't a Christian school, but this verse that we read became my life verse while I was there. 1 Thessalonians 2:8 again. So being affectionately desirous of you, maybe having a strong affection, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, our own lives, because you had become very dear to us. So the reality was, okay, I could share the gospel, but I was also sharing my life. I mean, I didn't have any life outside of that. So, because it was up on the hill, so I couldn't really walk around or anything off campus. And there was a gate at the bottom of the hill, so it was almost like, very isolated. So that was why for 8 years I didn't have any. I was single, but there's no hope of me meeting a wife, right? Because other than another teacher, and there weren't any other Christian teachers, women Christian teachers, but usually like my best friend, who was also a math teacher, he married an English teacher, and they were both on faculty. So there was really no hope of getting married. And so until that's when I think I told you about my wife, a future wife, at the CIF softball finals. So that was something that God orchestrated, because I was involved in coaching. And so, but this idea of having a strong effect, so I genuinely grew to love my students with affection. And so that was the advantage, because I cared for them so much, and I was living life with them. I could see what their challenges were. And that's what Paul's really saying. He cared so deeply for the Thessalonian people that they became very dear to him. And so that's why this passage is so powerful. It's not just sharing the gospel, but it's also sharing a life. And sometimes we forget that. We just want to share the gospel, but sharing our life is much deeper and has a bigger impact. And as this word, and then it says, become very dear to us. So that word dear, so every once in a while I get a message from an Indian, sometimes the parent, and the message on WhatsApp says, "How are you doing, dear?" So a grown man is calling me dear. And I said, wow, that's weird, because sometimes I call my wife dear, or that's kind of we don't say that too much anymore, but the idea that to call someone dear is usually between a husband and wife, or a boyfriend and girlfriend, right? How are you doing, dear? But the reality is, in the Indian languages, there's this word for dear. The word that can be translated as dear, it describes this deep affection. And so the father is calling me dear because the Indian word is basically, you are someone that I care very much about. And so the translation isn't so good in English. But that's something that I've learned, is this word. When you hold something dear, like I hold very dear my tennis racket, because it's 25 years old and it's so good. And so I hold, when we hold on to something that's dear to us, it means we love it very much, right? We have a strong affection for it. And so that's the idea is if we hold another person dear to us, that's really what this is calling, is talking about this deep discipleship. And then, after I left teaching and moved to Dallas, and we were ready to begin full-time ministry among international students, my senior pastor at the church there, Asian American Baptist Church, said, before just sending us out, said, it's really important for you to have fellowship and these relationships that are so deep. But he said there should be 3 types. You should have a close, affectionate relationship, discipling relationship, or be discipled by a more mature Christian. So try to find someone that is more mature than you and ask them to disciple you, because you can learn from them. And then he said, be in fellowship with people, Christians who are in the same role as you. It's kind of same maturity, same role in ministry. So other pastors for me, to be in fellowship with them. And then he said you need to disciple a less experienced Christian, someone to whom you're more mature than. So 3 different levels. That was interesting, but it's really changed my life because I prayed about that. You know, how could I have those 3 levels? And a more mature Christian, basically, was something that I realized I needed to. My sales manager, when I was selling textbooks in Texas, was a wonderful man, and so I continued the friendship with him after I moved away on the phone. So I asked him, basically, he discipled me because he was so much experience, a godly man. So I asked him, can we continue to, basically to have our disciple, can you continue basically mentoring? And so every year I fly to Abilene, Texas, and spend time with him because he still has a role with me. And he's almost like basically a father figure. And my father died when I was 8, so I haven't had that person. So he is someone that disciples me. And then to find someone at the same level of ministry, for whom I can have this fellowship with, and really living out this verse. I prayed, and I was at a pastor's conference, and it was in kind of a small group, and the topic was you should have fellowship with other pastors, because there are only certain things you can share with other pastors. And so I was in this group, and the two of us kind of locked eyes, and God kind of grabbed us both at the same time, and he said, I really didn't know him, just to say hi. We kind of locked eyes, and we said, we need to do this. And so we needed 4, and so each of us, we said, let's each invite somebody else to join us, because we have different networks. And so so the last 18 years, 4 of us have met for fellowship 1 morning a week, usually. 3 of the 4 can make it, we meet. And that's been made a huge difference in my life, because it's this fellowship together. Fellow means like brothers and sisters, basically, your family. So this has been a critical part of life. Probably the biggest priority is to have this meeting. And each of us has matured in ministry. So one of the pastors that I meet with is Pastor John Lowe of Epicenter, which started off as a small congregation and now has about 1,000 people in Pasadena, a very missional church. And another is a Korean American pastor of a big church in Chatsworth, so he drives all the way. Another pastor is a Japanese American pastor who lives in this area. So it's kind of ironic. It's a Chinese American pastor, Japanese American pastor, and a Korean American pastor, and me. Well, I'm kind of multi-Asian, right? I kind of fit in everywhere. And so this has been a huge priority. And the way to check whether I think we all need this in a relation, this fellowship, is to check to see how what this looks like is if you're in this close fellowship relationship, if you need help, you just message. You used to be called, but now you message them, and they will all come. So twice, one of our fellowship group has been in the hospital unexpectedly for surgery, and so message goes out, and the 3 of us are there within an hour, and that's very powerful to have 3 brothers or sisters in Christ that for whom they'll drop anything and come and pray with you. So that's very, very. Your family will do that, but to have a fellowship group has been very, very powerful. And so, and then for the discipling relationship for us, working among international students, that's easy because we have many relationships with international students for whom we disciple. So those 3 levels of fellowship have been critical for me. And then what Paul also writes about in this passage, and this is a big part of fellowship, is putting the other person first, or encouraging. And so Paul writes later, he says, "For you, remember, brothers." So he's calling them brothers. So that's a term of fellowship. Brothers and sisters. "Remember our labor and toil. We worked night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you, but we proclaimed to you the gospel of God. You were witnesses, God also, how holy and righteous and blameless our conduct toward you believers." And so this word holy is very interesting. We don't, sometimes we say, don't be holier than thou. We don't want to say, I am holy, because that would be very proud. We don't use that word that much. But this is, I wouldn't say to you that I'm holy, right? But that's what Paul is saying right here. He says how holy and righteous and blameless was our conduct. So he's not talking about the person, he's talking about the behavior, being holy. And so what does holy mean? It means, when you look it up, it's spiritually pure. So it's the idea of being pure in heart. And this is whenever we are in a discipling relationship, it means putting the other person first. It means having a pure heart, not a jaded heart or a selfish heart. And so that's how Paul is defining the behavior that's holy and righteous, and he uses the word blameless. And part of that is, the biggest challenge for many of us is the idea of forgiving other people. And so, so many times, as I've grown, I feel like, oh, my wife did something, she's done something wrong, and so I get upset. But a lot of times she doesn't really, she didn't do anything wrong. It's my own heart. So my heart became selfish, and so that's something that is that I've had to learn about, just the position of the heart. So yesterday, my daughter, who was a climbing coach and works at the climbing gym in Culver City, so that's quite a ways from San Gabriel where we live. And so she gives lessons on how to do the belaying. She also coaches young climbers. And so I was there at 9 a.m. yesterday climbing. I had my rowing. I took a terrible fall the other day, I should tell you. So I was the last hold, and this is without ropes. It's not very high. And I was tired. I get really tired fast because you guys have done climbing, right? A little bit. No, you should try it. You could climb indoors in Madison. I'm sure there was a climbing gym, right? Yeah, and so it's a great workout. But after 30 minutes, I'm just exhausted, because I'm pulling my body weight up the wall. It's only up 20 feet up, and the whole floor is padded. So and when I get tired, I kind of lunge. Okay, I'm going to go for it. And sometimes I was tired and I was going, and then the last hold, it says finish on it, so it's clear. So I just did a lunge for it, and I grabbed just the very edge of it, and then I spun around. And that's bad news when you kind of spin around, because then and then I fell off, but it was awkward. So if you're under control and you fall, you fall and you land kind of under control. You're supposed to land on your body, and then you land on your knees, your legs, and you kind of let your knees go down. You kind of sit, and that's normal. And it's padded floor. But I spun around, so I awkwardly fell. I wasn't really prepared, and so I landed on my back, and my head whiplashed back, and my glasses flew off, and then immediately I had some pain in my upper back. But it went away after 4 or 5 days. So, where was I talking about falling? Oh, okay. So I climbed yesterday morning, and my daughter started working at 10, and I saw her, and she said, and she had texted my wife because she forgot. She does this intensive sheets to prepare for her coaching. So she had she was ready to give these sheets to the young climber that she's coaching, and she forgot it. And so she had texted my mom, my wife, to say, "Mom, can you bring these to me?" And my wife kind of texted back and said, "Oh, I just don't have time." And so when I heard that, I said, I don't have anything. That's a priority to me. So this is the difference really in fellowship. I could have stayed at home. I was going to go home, and I had a couple hours I was going to read a little bit and eat a nice lunch, but that was her need, and I put that as more important than my own. So I said, okay, I'm going to go and drive home, pick up her sheet, and drive back to the climbing gym and give it to her. And I did, and I surprised her. And so that's the difference. So that made me happy to serve her, and that made me happy. And it also showed that my heart was more about pleasing or serving her than sitting at home reading a book or whatever. And so I think that's our goal should be to have the heart that values relationship more than my own personal needs. So my relationship with God is first, and then my relationship with my wife and my kids. And when we talk about fellowship, as Paul is saying, our relationship with our Christian brothers and sisters is almost like that family relationship. And then the other thing Paul does here is he talks about being an encourager. So verse 11 says, "For you know how, like a father with his children, we exhorted each one of you and encouraged you and charged you to walk in a manner worthy of God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory." So this word encourage is a big role in terms of fellowship. So someone who has this close relationship, like a parent with a child, gives encouragement. And the word really, when you analyze it, means give courage to. So, or confidence or support to. So my oldest daughter, who came at age 17 from Cambodia, a big part of my role as her father now is to give her encouragement. Just tell her, you are smart. You can do it. You have your. So she wasn't used to hearing that before she came, because a lot of cultures don't give encouragement. The parents don't necessarily lift up their kids. And I think sometimes Western culture does it too much. It gives prizes for everything, and but the reality is, sometimes encouragement is so necessary, I think, because it gives someone courage. So for her, it was very hard to learn English. So she was at Pastor City College for 5 years. She was smart enough, but the English was a big barrier. And now her English is better than mine in some ways, because she has confidence and she's worked hard at it. And so when we talk about giving encouragement, we also talk about giving comfort. And so, but it's more about what Paul is saying is kind of to walk alongside someone as they're living life. So that gets back to that verse 8, where it says, we are sharing not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, our own lives, because you have become very dear to us. So a turning point in any kind of this relationship, and this is why it's powerful with the three other pastors, is to kind of live life together through the ups and the downs. And so all of us have seen that, and that made a big difference with my oldest daughter. I think I might have mentioned this before, but she was working so hard in ESL class at PC, and they're really hard. PC's got good teachers, right, Austin? Hard teachers? Sometimes. The English teachers were hard, and so she was struggling through, I think it was level 4, where you have to write an essay. So it's really hard. And so she worked so hard on an essay, like the final essay, and she turned it in, and I gave her encouragement, but I didn't write it for her. I didn't, I wanted her to do it. So she turned it in, and the professor didn't think it was her own work, because it was really good. And so her professor said, "I'm going to fail you for the whole semester because I think this was not your work. And so basically the professor was accusing her of cheating, and which was not true. You know, and that meant she was going to take her, it was going to take her longer to get to, to transfer. And so I said, well, you should, go talk to your professor, try to convince her that you didn't cheat. And so, at that time, my daughter wasn't driving yet, so I drove, and so I said, I'll go with you and I'll pray for you. I probably can't go in and talk to the professor because this is college. So I said, do you guys remember the story? I don't think yeah. So I went in, and we went to the office, and I knew I couldn't go in, so I kind of sat in the hallway and prayed, and the professor did close the door so I could hear, and my daughter just, said, I didn't cheat, this is my work, and the professor was so mean to her. He said, no, I think you cheated, and you're not ready. And so she basically didn't give her the benefit of the doubt, and so my daughter came out and said, and so was disappointed, and so we got in the car, and as we talked, I just started bawling. I started crying. Oh, this is so terrible. But that was because, and then she comforted me. She said, Dad, it's okay. God maybe wants me to spend another, semester here. And, it's okay, Dad. So she was comforting me. But from that point, our relationship was even closer, right? Why? Because I cared so deeply. That's what Paul is really expressing. That he cared so deeply about the people of Thessalonica. That it's this deep heart level connection. And so she was comforting me. And when she was the one that, that was disappointed, and she ended, but when you look back, she's thankful because another semester of level 4 made her English even better. But she ended up being at PCC for 5 years. And then now she's on track to graduate from Cal Poly Pomona in 2 years. This is her senior year. She's taking she took a class at Mount Sac Austin this summer. It was easier. You've done that, right?
No.
No? Yeah, so sometimes there was a super hard class. But it also puts her on track to graduate in June. So you're on track to graduate in June, right? Yeah, it's hard to get classes, right? So so that was, but when she looks back, she sees the value of spending 5 years at PCC, but she's anxious to get out of college after this is her 7th year. But that was the challenge. So she was comforting me, and that's a sign of deep fellowship is mutual comfort, not just one way. So that was important, and that's a big part of what Paul is talking about. It's just listening. So he would listen to his friends, to the people, and but also he would serve as a model. And the model was listening. And so again, with my wife, when she will come to me many times. She has a hard job as athletic director of St. Gabriel Christian School. And a lot of issues come up and challenges, and so she's constantly telling me her problems. This happened, and this happened, and this happened. But I've learned that I shouldn't say, this is what you should do, because she doesn't want me to solve the problem. She just wants me to encourage her and comfort her and basically listen. And often by listening, then she knows the answer, the solution. And so especially many people in these relationships, it's one-sided. So we have a tendency to solve the problem. And the most important thing I can do is to listen to her and say, I want to pray for you. Because we have this deep relationship. And I know that she knows what to do. And so this idea of again, that Paul is talking about is critical because it's this idea of holding someone dear in your heart. This is a deep fellowship. And I always say, it has to be from the heart because you can't fake it. So getting back to Chick-fil-A, when I go to American grocery store, it really bothers me because the checker will say, how are you? How are you? Can they know my name because I've given my loyalty card, right? They say, how are you, Mr. Pearce? Did you find everything? how was your day? I know it's fake. And I can tell, because I can tell the heart, you know, that it's, and I basically said, they're being paid to, and that's not a bad thing, but for me it bugs me. But when I go to the Chinese market, and usually the checkout person is not smiling, you know, just doing their job, and then I'll say to them, I'll say like, you know, where are you from? And they'll say, well, Guangzhou, China, and I'll say, oh, I've been there 5 times. It's a great city, and then they smile, and you know, and so we have this exchange, mutual exchange, right? And I know they haven't been paid to be nice to me. They're just, you know, but I've kind of earned it by having this you know, engaging them. And Chick-fil-A. So when you go to Chick-fil-A, you know they're being some. So I go to a lot of Chick-fil-A's. In fact, I went to Bishop with my daughter to go climbing, and on the way back there was a Chick-fil-A in Lancaster, no, Palmdale, you know, way up the 14 freeway. So we saw, that was the week I went 4 times to get macaroni and cheese. So when I went in there, the Chick-fil-A in Palmdale, and the person who helped me wasn't smiling. She wasn't, you know, she was just kind of, it was just like being at Wendy's. I shouldn't say that, but I mean, she was not that friendly. And then that Friday night, there's some new students who came to Cal State LA, so I said, let's go to Chick-fil-A. And so I took them, and my daughter was working there, so I kind of got to observe her in action. And she was, you know, I was like 3rd in line, and the person came up, and my daughter kind of leaned toward him and said, welcome to Chick-fil-A, it's my pleasure to serve you today. And then she took the order, and you repeated it, and she was smiling, but it was genuine. You know, so you could if you know the heart, you can tell whether it's a genuine affection, right, or whether it's fake. And so the people, you know, that's one reason why Chick-fil-A does so well, is because it's genuine, usually. And someone who doesn't have this genuine affection for people, servant's heart, they have trouble at a place like Chick-fil-A. You know, they do well at, you know, other restaurants where it doesn't really matter that much, right? Because people are coming, you know, because of the low price or whatever. But my daughter has, so you should go to the one on in Monterey Park sometime, right off the 60 freeway. And then, and my daughter she's probably the shortest person in there. She also wears hearing aid. I think you guys know that. So she has hearing aids. She's about, I shouldn't say that, but anyway, she's very, very, and now all of a sudden, like part-time work is supposed to be 20 hours a week. She gets, this week coming up, she's going to have 37 hours. Because she's doing such a good job, right, at the register. And because it's hard to, you know, it's hard to maintain this kind of energy, right, if it's fake. But if it's real, if it's from the heart, it's not an issue, right? Because she's not acting. It's generally from the heart. And so that's the difference, is if you're faking something, then you easily get fatigued because it takes the effort. But if it's from the heart, if it's genuine, that's what Paul is talking about. He said, you know, he's again using himself as the example. He said, holy, righteous, blameless was our conduct toward the believers. So he said he and his friends, they had this behavior that was blameless. And again, he's really talking about this pure-hearted relationship. And you know, and so and again, you know, a lot of that comes from living life together. Going back to that first verse as we close, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because He would be very dear to us. And when we share our lives with someone, that's the chance really to share the gospel as well, to share what it means to follow Christ, because Christ is a solution for problems, for issues, and gives us that pure heart. So sometimes we just think, well, the gospel solves problems, but it also solves our own heart problem. It gives us this love for others that we can't fake. And so I found my best, when I disciple others, a lot of times it's doing activities together because we're living life. So that's why I like tennis so much. And my issue, you know, when I mentioned the man who's discipled me, the senior sales manager, Because when my dad died when I was young, I didn't have a discipler. I didn't have a male role model. And when I went to UCLA, I didn't know anybody because I was afraid of these relationships. I didn't enter in these deep relationships. And I stayed away from the campus fellowships even. And I would go home and spend time with my mom, which was okay. And so the challenge is, I think for each of us, is we need to be discipled by someone. We need to be in fellowship with peers. That's why the fellowship is so good with peers. And then we need to disciple others. So there's 3 levels, and that makes a difference in terms of our own maturity, and really our own heart. And ultimately, the fuel for this, you can't fake that. That's deep relationship. The fuel is our own relationship with God, so spending time in God's Word. And even a passage like this was so encouraging to me because Paul, we can learn so much from his life. So the question is now, who are some in my life, in our lives, that we can enter into fellowship with? So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for what you teach us in your Word about truly biblical, pure-hearted fellowship. We pray that you'll give us opportunities to be encouragers, to be comforters, to empathize with others. And we pray, Father, for our own hearts, that you will give us pure hearts, holy hearts, and blameless hearts, and that we will draw closer to you and pursue this holiness. We pray that you will help us, give us courage to enter into fellowship that is pleasing to you, that is from our hearts. And we pray that you will give us the courage and the strength we need each day to be your disciples and to draw closer to you. In Jesus' name, amen.